Welcome to the latest episode of TechFu. Today I want to talk about avoiding ego stats. For all the time I've been in marketing, there are people justifying their career, justifying their job, their salary, and they're doing it by telling leadership what they believe leadership wants to hear. Oh, the numbers are up. Oh, this is really good. The conversion rate is strong. We're looking really good for this. And the end result never seems to bear out. Very rarely do I recall the result being as positive as the PR or the marketing or the SEO person had led us to believe. And the reason for that is that we all tell ourselves stories, of course, to protect ourselves and to position ourselves in the world, in the business. And so ultimately our heart rules our head. Now, in previous episodes, I've talked about the art of heart and the need for our hearts and intuition to lead the way. But when it comes to statistics, the problem with numbers and statistics is if you're going to be statistical, you can't be egotistical. You have to be black and white and true to the numbers. You have to be brave and accepting that sometimes the numbers are going to make you look crap. That a lot of the time in marketing is the reality, because you're testing things, you're trying things, things aren't working. But when the chips are down and you can't afford to look crap, people revert to ego stats. They find ways to justify the campaign, the spend, the investment, whatever it is. Ultimately, everything we do here at TechFu is about reestablishing the connection to intuition in marketing. It's about relearning how to pay attention to gut feel. And a lot of the time, the reason we don't have that capacity is because we haven't really spent time focused on building that muscle, the intuition muscle, the gut feel muscle. We've put our ego first and let that determine what stats we're going to talk about, why they matter, how they prove that we're brilliant and that we're geniuses. And ultimately, actually, if you're not able to tell a management leader or a client that you made a bad call, or you got it wrong, or that your judgment was off, or whatever it is, if you're not able to do that, then the problem you have is you're probably weaving stories based on ego stats. Now, if you're a business leader, you need to know that ego stats are often what you're going to hear and what you're going to be told. You're going to be fed a story that justifies the existence of someone else and has no bearing on the profitability of your business. And of course, as a business leader, that's really all you really care about. And so you have to be able to see through that. So for business leaders, intuition and gut feel matters too. When you're being told statistics or results of a campaign, you have to pay attention to your intuition and call it out if you think it's BS. You have to climb it down without shaming the person and say, is that the real stat? Where did we screw up on that campaign? You have to probe for the failures, because marketing is, of course, more fail than win. If marketing was more win than fail, then it would be easier. And marketing's not easy, and that's the point. So you have to lead by scooping up the employee or scooping up the agency and saying, look, I get what you're telling me. I can see why having 400 million impressions on that webpage were good, but what's the outcome? What have we actually sold as a result? Where has it taken us? So what? We've got 800,000 followers on Instagram. How much value are we creating out of that? Now, value doesn't necessarily mean sales, of course. It could be people signing up for an email newsletter, whatever the outcomes are. But you've got to hold those outcomes pretty honestly up and hold your team, staff, agency, you've got to hold them to account. Because if there's one thing I've realized is that people are going to revert to story and to ego, and therefore ego stats are going to always surface. So it's got to be the business leader's job to ultimately work out what's really going on in the business. So if you're not in tune with your intuition and gut feel, then that's an even bigger problem. It's one thing if your team and your agency aren't, but if you're not, then you're going to get the wool pulled over your eyes. And ultimately, all of this points to the reason why so many people distrust marketing. It's Darth Vader versus Obi-Wan. It's good versus evil, and it's not intentional. People don't do it on purpose. Don't get me wrong. I don't think anyone's seeking to defraud anyone on purpose. Not at all. On the contrary, I think it's part of human nature, and that's why it's really important to build the other muscles around intuition and gut feel. Because just because the stats say that's how people will react doesn't mean you should run the campaign. Just because the stats tell you to use that hashtag because of a big disaster doesn't mean you should use that hashtag. And it's really important we get back to listening to our intuition before we completely mess up our brand on the basis of ego stats. It's really, really vital. Hope that helps.